Today we are talking a lot about plant-a-seed and greens in general. It's the theme of this year, and Slow Food USA has a theme for the whole year. And the theme for our office is nourishing our connections and connecting our foodways. And this is something I'm really excited about doing with our community. There's so many incredible eaters and growers and producers in our network and beyond our network that we want to just bring them to the table and share our connections and share our love of good food and how we interact with it and how we interact with it in our slow food way. The Plant a Seed campaign in particular is in its 7th year this year with Slow Food. Every year it's sort of evolved into a different thematic, and last year we tried for the first time to just focus on one crop. So we've used beans, and I know a lot of you in the audience have participated with the Plant a Seed last year with the beans theme, and it really seemed to resonate with our community to really use one crop to talk about some of the major themes in slow food, those being climate resilience, nutrition, and then a third leg to that table. Last year, that leg was seed saving and seed libraries. This year, that third leg is our biological and cultural diversity that these crops represent. So greens was the natural follow-up to beans. With beans, we really get into nitrogen fixation in the field, and the thing that really benefits from nitrogen fixation are the leafy greens. And so as I was developing this kit this year, I just was really excited about working through the big groups of greens and highlighting each of those. Today, we're going to go through what those greens are. We're going to hear from people who are intimately connected with these greens. And at the end of today's panel, we're going to be doing a giveaway of one of the Plant a Seed kits. The kits are beautiful this year. This is why I love working with small seed producers. They have gorgeous seed packets. There's 7 in each kit. We produced a little green zine that's going to be in the kit that has growing information. It has stories. It has some poetry. It also has a bunch of recipes. And then there's some really fun stickers from the network, our own, and then also some Plant a Seed stickers as well. So there's a bunch of really lovely components in here, and that'll get you on the right foot when you start planting your greens this year. So without further ado, I would love to launch into introducing our panelists today. We have Adrian Lipscombe, who is a chef. She's a Snail Blazer Award winner from our network. She's also the founder of the 40 Acres and a Mule project. She's also on the board of the Heirloom Collard Project, as a partner with us this year. So I wanted to welcome Adrian. I'm going to go through everyone, and then I'll give you all a chance to talk about your individual projects. Next up is Bonnetta Adeeb. She provided us with the seeds for the Ultra Cross collards in our kits this year. Bonnetta is the powerhouse behind Ujamaa Seeds and the Ujamaa Farm Cooperative Project, and we are just so grateful to have you take time out of your busy schedule. Everybody here is just very, very, very busy. And I'm just so grateful for you to spend your time with us today. So thanks for being here, Bonnetta. Also, Melissa DeSa from Working Food. She helped provide us with the Feaster's mustard seeds that are in our kit this year. She is going to talk to us a little bit today about the Plant a Seed, the Arc of Taste committee, she's a member of the Arc of Taste committee in the Southeast. We also have interpretation today provided by Topacio Hernandez. And if you need interpretation services, you can click the globe to get started. Topacio, did you want to do any introduction? Okay, thank you. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you. Lovely. Well, ladies, I really would love to hear from your own words, about your projects, your organization, your slow food affiliation, and which green connects you to the Plant a Seed kit. And then we'll dive into each of the greens specifically and talk them through. So how about Adrian? Let's start with you. What's your organization and your slow food affiliation?
Just had to jump off mute. Well, thank you for inviting me. So I have 40 acres in a mule, which we look to preserve the legacy of Black farmers and Black agriculture. And then my daily life, I get to cook, so that's a lot of fun. And I get to investigate different ingredients based off of looking at it in an herbal perspective as an herbalist, or to look at it as making yummy food. So that has been some of the best. I think I have one of the best jobs, really, being able to work with wonderful farmers and work with wonderful seed savers, and be able to talk about the different types of ingredients and what, as a chef, we can do to help propagate and help move it forward. So, along with slow food, especially with working with y'all with demos and working with y'all in education, is really big for me to get this out to the public, like nationally, beyond our hospitality field.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Bonnetta, how about you? Would you like to introduce yourself and your project?
Sure. My name is Bonnetta Adeeb, and I'm one of the most excited collard people you would ever want to meet in your life. I came to the Heirloom Collard Project when somebody says, "Does anybody want to grow collard?" It was like, yes, we need collard. We need collard in our lives. Um, I'm with Ujamaa Farming Cooperative. We are a group of BIPOC growers uh, uh, growing nationally and internationally, reclaiming our agricultural heritage, rematriating culturally meaningful varieties. And our work with Ujamaa Seeds is to make those varieties available to everyone, everybody who wants to live longer and healthier and better because they've added greens to their diet. So we really think that the work we're doing with the Heirloom Collar Project has spoken to many hearts. You know, they talked about winning hearts and minds. Well, also winning, flavors, a taste, is a good way to reach people. One of the things that people believe is that if they can grow collard, if they get their hands on greens, then that will be connecting to their traditions. It was something that was always on the table for Thanksgiving, for all holidays, and there's good reasons for that. The other thing that makes these greens so important is that because they made up a large part of the diet of enslaved people in this country, and so we're connected on so many levels. And if it is true, you are what you eat, then we are all greens. That's where we come from. If we're unhealthy, it's probably because we've moved away from those important traditions. And so, with the help of these beautiful people, we're reclaiming it, we're naming it, and we are expanding the varieties that are made available to everyone. Everyone who wants to grow anything, we're down with them.
Awesome. I love the enthusiasm. I've been so excited by all the greens in the kit, but collards, the projects around collards right now are very exciting. So I'm excited to dig deep into that a little bit today too. Melissa, why don't you tell us about your project?
Yeah, and I'll just say I can vouch. Bonnetta is absolutely the most enthusiastic and passionate and excited person about collards. Sometimes we'll show up to the meetings and might be tired and just whatever, and Bonnetta gets us all all excited and juiced up about collards. So I'm Melissa DeSa, and I co-founded a nonprofit organization here in North Central Florida, in Gainesville about 10 years ago, called Working Food. And we do a lot of food systems work that's really fun, literally from seed to the plate. So I mostly get to work on our Southern Heritage Seed program, which works with growers to identify, grow, save, share, teach other people how to grow varieties of vegetables that do really well in our amazing but challenging climate. We also have a youth garden and education program where kids all the way from preschool to high school get to work in the gardens with us every single week all through the school year. Some kids year after year come back, which is awesome because they really just get to see all of it. And they grow the food, they start the seeds, they save some of the seeds, they get to cook the food. And then we have a commercial kitchen at our facility where a lot of food entrepreneurs, anyone from food trucks, bakers, folks that make tempeh, I mean, any kind of business, you name it, they're in our kitchen renting it by the hour. So it's really kind of fun to see all these interesting local food ventures spread up around us. So like I said, I mostly get to do the seed program. That's where my heart lies. I love growing vegetables. I love trying new things. I love saving seeds and getting to be involved in projects like this. And I'm also part of the Heirloom Collard Project, one of the earliest folks to kind of jump on board when it was forming, still active today, and getting to work with awesome folks like Adrian and Bonnetta and a lot of others that aren't here. And the green that I contributed to this collection is a mustard green that's been grown in North Florida for at least 100 years. Of course, prior to that, who knows where this mustard came from and has gone around the world, but it's a really interesting adapted variety for here that's kind of become a local favorite with efforts to get other people excited about growing it and eating it and sharing the stories, which is what it's all about. I think we can all say if we don't tell the stories of our food and where they came from and who's behind them, they're just not as exciting. So that's me.
Yeah, I love that point, Melissa, that like the storytelling and the stories behind the seeds are really what connect us. And as I was researching, and I'm a grower myself, I had a farm for many, many years, and I always loved learning the history of each of the things that I was growing because I felt more connected to it. And when researching greens for this kit, I was like, oh man, the stories are so tied to folks' identities. And that was really important to me with this kit to bring those stories to the front. So especially with collards and especially with the mustards. And then we also have, let me just go through the list of the things in our kit. We have Hanson lettuce that is on the Arc of Taste. We have Feaster's mustard, which is pending on the Arc of Taste. We have the Ultra Cross collard brassicas, and the Ultra Cross collard project, we'll have Bonnetta talk about that a little bit, but one of the collards within that Ultra Cross group is the yellow collard, yellow cabbage collard, I believe, and that one is on the Arc of Taste. We branched out a little bit with this kit this year. Oftentimes in the past, the kit has been focused on getting Arc of Taste onto our plates and into our gardens, and we're like, there's so many other things that I would also like to introduce, especially when we're talking about greens, because there's not a ton of greens on the Arc of Taste. So a few of those that aren't Arc of Taste items that are in the kit are Yu Choi Sum brassica, which is like a Chinese broccoli, Matilda escarole, so that's one of the chicories, which is a nice group, and then New Mexico amaranth, and the sea kale brassica is actually another Arc of Taste one. So what I try to do is like get all the big groups of greens involved so that when people grow them out in their gardens, they can see the huge biodiversity in the groups of greens between the lettuces, the mustards, and the brassica group, and then the amaranths and chicories as well. And I'd love to hear what you all have to say about how adaptable greens can be to different climates too, because these kits go all across the country, to all over the place. And I know I'm based in Vermont and I'm able to grow collards, and I think people are surprised by that. But you know, some of these things are very drought resistant, and some are becoming more of a perennializing green. So these lend me to think about you know, the climate and how great greens can be as allies in climate uncertainty also. So I'd love to see if any of you have any thoughts about how adaptable greens can be to different climates.
I guess I'll jump in.
Yeah,
you know, so a lot of these greens and other vegetables, of course, before they ever even got into our hands, have been traveling around for hundreds or thousands of years, and they find their ways into different nooks and crannies and communities, you know, whether they're at sea level or in a mountain range or in the humid tropics or the cold Northeast. Like they've just gone everywhere, and in the hands of people that have been taking care of those vegetables and keeping them in their communities, they've really diversified a lot and adapted. And that's still happening today. That's not to say that, you know, you get some seeds in the mail and that's it. You know, you keep growing them where you live, and if you're into seed saving and you like this kind of thing, they start you know, they make their own seeds, and if you save them and you keep saving the ones that do well where you live, they start to change. And I've heard one grower say that over time, this process, you know, these plants really develop the fingerprint of the grower and the place within them. I think it's absolutely true. And there's just so much diversity there. And that's really my favorite part of my job. Like I get so excited when I get to try new things, and like there's a new type of collard or amaranths I'm getting really excited about.
Yeah.
And there's just, yeah, there's so much diversity to explore there. And because everyone's climate, even our microclimates are so different, you know, someone just 2 blocks from where I have a garden can have a very different microclimate and things just grow differently. So they're very adaptable, they're very versatile. I think all of these greens, except for the lettuce perhaps, are also ones, not to jump the gun on seed saving, but they're really outcrossing, right? Like they put out these beautiful flowers and the bees come and it's a bonanza. And so they're just you know, hybridizing and cross-pollinating, and just that's how change happens, and they're adapting to our space. And so, yeah, it's just really exciting. And I would encourage people just to try new things all the time and see what you like, see how the plants like where you garden and how you grow stuff. And yeah, there's something for everyone there.
Yeah, that's awesome. It makes me think of the Ultracross Colored project. Bonnetta, I think this would be a good time for you to talk about what Ultracross means and what the seed saving adventure with coloreds can lead us to.
Right. So Chris Smith, who is the one that organized this project, we're working with the Utopian Seed Project to bring these forth, and our dear sister Ira Wallace, who's one of the founding members of Ujamaa. Many of you know about her incredible work in making vegetable farming, vegetable growing something that everybody should be doing, right? So I think one of the things that we realized was, in U.S., somebody made reference to the fact that seeds aren't necessarily, these greens are not necessarily, the seeds aren't as promoted as some other varieties. And, we have the same question. So when we looked at what is the origin of collard, and we realized that collards are actually an African American variety that was stewarded by enslaved people, and using the skills that they were brought to this country to provide, as we know, rice and indigo, all the things that African people were brought to this country with. One of the things that came on slave ships, was the pea. We call it the African pea. Some of y'all may still call it the dubious name of cowpea. We call them African peas because that's where they originated. But what we realized was that many of our African varieties of greens did not make the journey. And, why that is, I have a tendency to think it's because some of the seeds are so small. If you look at amaranth, oh my God, that seed is tiny. Molokai, those seeds are so small, they were difficult to transport. And so people came to this country and needed to eat greens. And what they found was naturalized wild greens, kale or collard, cabbage that was just out there, and individual families and communities developed these, collected them, nurtured them in the same way that Melissa was just saying. So that's why right now we have 120 varieties and growing, and most people only know of 2 or 3. And some people can't name any variety. It's like, those greens, I've been growing them every year, but I don't know what they are. So what we hope to do is help people to identify with these greens by naming them. Got some really cool names. So, and Adrian did this amazing piece for us that we were at a conference at the Carolina Farm Association in Durham this summer. And she cooked these amazing things, and we did taste testing for greens. And we found out that people wanted to taste these greens. They wanted to know. And so the thing I find most exciting is that when we do presentations, we talk to people about, some are white or broadleaf, some are dark colored, purple and blue, and some are, you mentioned the yellow cabbage collard, which is particularly loved by the Lumbee people of Eastern North Carolina. That different communities, and the Southern tradition has incorporated collards and other greens like mustard and turnip into their tradition. So as we begin to talk to people about these greens, and Melissa, maybe you can talk about the process by which it crossed. You mentioned that the greens crossed, but during the grow out of the varieties that we had, the 21 or so varieties, there was sort of an accident that happened in the field where all these beautiful greens that were being collards that were grown for display got a chance to be a little promiscuous. As you know, brassicas are notoriously promiscuous, and they got a chance to mingle. And when these 21 varieties mingled, they produced some gorgeous children. They were awesome. And so, even though our work is to steward individual varieties, we have found that the discussion around intercrossing, around culturally meaningful varieties, and climate change, and how these the ultracross can help people find greens that are adapted to their microclimate or whatever. People just got excited about it. So it turns out, even though we talk specifically about to beat the dikes, or William Moore or William Alexander or other varieties of collard we have, people feel that if they have the ultracross, they can see it all, and then they can become a part of this movement we have, seed reclaiming our heritage around seed stewardship, and they can do their own seed breeding. It's a way to get them started, even though collard or brassicas are not the easiest thing to start, but there's the cultural motivation that people have. And so I think that's why the ultracross is a gardener's or farmer's favorite.
I was so excited to be able to put it in the kit this year, because since the kits do go to all sorts of different USDA growing zones throughout the country, I was like, everyone will be able to like have a certain expression of a collard in their particular region. And how cool will that be? Like, to just, everyone's going to plant these seeds, and the right collard for their environment will be the one that thrives. And that's really exciting, I think, as a grower. Very cool.
It's very educational and in like the fun kind of education, because you go out to a place where they're growing now. Like, we have a whole bunch of them growing at a school garden down the street from us, and everybody's just like, these are collards, because it is like the ultracross is just a bonanza of all the collard features like mashed up into a garden space, like curly ones, waxy ones, green ones, yellow ones, purple ones, sort of purplish ones, tall ones, fat ones, ones that are more cabbagey, ones that are way more traditional collard. I mean, it's so cool. And people can kind of pick their favorites and just be exposed to the idea that, like Bonnetta said, most folks don't even know there's more than one variety of collard, never mind potentially hundreds, and then you see it there in the ultracross, and it's a lot of fun. I love it. And we've been trying to adapt it further and further south, because where we're at in Florida, we can't reliably save collard seeds all the time because it doesn't have enough cold exposure. This winter has been cold enough that some of them are flowering, but we got, from Chris in North Carolina, and then someone in Georgia grew them, and he successfully saved seeds. So he gave us some, and then we did them in Florida once. And I'm like, oh, maybe we can have a collard that doesn't require so much cold, and we can still make seeds. Although anyone will tell you that cold exposure is what makes collards really special. So anyhow.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And all those textures are so inspiring to me. And I know when I get beautiful textures in my garden, I get inspired to cook them. And I want to, use their attributes in the kitchen. And I would love Adrian to talk about her favorite greens to cook with. And like, what are you inspired by when we talk about greens, Adrian?
Colors were so interesting to me, because especially when I heard about the collard heirloom group, I literally emailed them right away, because I grew up eating collards, and I was taught how to make collards by my great grandmother. And the way that we were taught was, we learned to read the greens. We were taught to, as we wash them, to read them. It tells you a lot about the farm. It'll tell you a lot about the farmer, their soil. It tells a story. So these leaves tell a story. So it's really sentimental to me, the collard green, but also my curiosity, right? I took time to go to the New York Botanical Gardens in their rare plant section, to talk about collard greens of all things, but to discover that some of the oldest collard greens were Mediterranean, right? And for me, I was kind of taken back, because I'm like, no, they're African American, but in reality, they're all over. And and as the Mediterranean area also includes part of Africa, I started having this hypothesis that they were spread all around. So, I try to go back, like, when the continents were together, were they wild? Were they one of the oldest ones we have? And when the continents split, because you have areas like Brazil that have a staple dish with collard greens. We
Mm.
have different varieties and crossing for generations within farmers in the United States. Be it that we may have brought seeds, but maybe it was already here. Some of the oldest recipes, because that's my interest, right? Recipes. I think the oldest recipe I could find was in Old German,
Mm.
and it literally lays some of the same context of how I make my collard greens today. So those stories and reading that, verbally or somehow, that these recipes are just extending on to what we have today. And then what collard greens we use beyond just food. How did the indigenous use collard greens? How did African American and different cultures use the collard greens beyond just eating them? Their medicinal uses. It
Right.
just becomes so curious, and and really researching that history. Even the controversy of, did collard greens come before cabbage? It's really big, and I can go on that. But just the diving in and really trying to understand our ingredients is one thing, but the delectable and recipes you create out of them. We did one that we made a bread and butter collard stem recipe, because we were looking beyond, like, people usually throw the stems away. Like,
Mm.
what else can we do with the stems? Which they were fabulous. And then, an understanding just the different varieties and the textures of the collard greens, and then what we can do with them. And I just recently came back from Cameroon, and Bonnetta, we got to talk about that, and talk about their use of using greens, and how they make them in dishes. It's just exponential of how old and how long these collards or greens have been around, and then how we use them. It's just, there's
Mhm.
so many different varieties, so I get really excited about it
Yeah.
because there's just so many things that we can do with them.
Well, and the different, especially the brassica family, it really reminds you how closely tied humans have been to developing food source, right? So I know that the brassica family of what cabbage, kohlrabi, kale, all of these the collards are in that group, and they all come from a wild brassica, and then over time have been selected for specific traits. So um, I'm sure one of you knows exactly what I'm talking about, but I wonder if you could walk us through a little bit, like the human connection to selection, right? Because you want to select, like for the in the case of the collard greens, you're selecting that wild brassica for its leaf traits, so that it has a leaf, and then for the broccoli, that wild um,
So the
brassica
flower.
was chosen for the flowering traits, right? So you can get this different expression of the vegetable from just the relationship to the wild plant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think for the purposes of selection, I find that people want greens year round, but there's this cabbage looper, this amazing,
Oh,
horrible critter and other critters that attack it during warm weather. And so, and because regenerative growers don't use, chemicals and all those, toxins on their food, that was a problem. One of the things we observed was that it seemed like the blue and the purple
mm,
were somehow resistant. They were the last ones that were eaten by the bugs after everything else was gone. We're first for the cabbage collards, the white and yellow cabbage collards, and the last man standing were these blue and purple collards, and we have quite a few. When we were traveling in New Jersey, it was so amazing how beautiful these were. They had been able to take very cold weather, and they were still flourishing. So I think that's really exciting, and all that you can learn when you go out, a bunch of them. I also want to
mhm.
talk about preparation. So, I'm a retired history teacher, so forgive me. But as a gift for many girls, when they marry, they receive a pot. So it could be any shape. If it is South Africa, it's a three-legged pot. And many African dishes are basically stews, one-course meals, and one pot meals. And so, and these are very convenient for us people living in the modern era too, to be able to introduce something really yummy into this pot. So you spoke, Adrian, about you learning how to cook greens from your family. I learned how to cook greens from my adopted family from West Africa, where there are no hoofed animals. And so they use dried fish, shrimp, and peanut butter to enrich their greens rather than ham hocks and neck bones and stuff that was a tradition that I grew up with. And so they use a sofrito. That's an African variety of a sofrito. And you say, well, where these things piggyback as people travel? And we call them Mimi greens because I got them from my adopted sister, Mimi Gebetolansi from Niger. But everything's in there: shrimp, salmon, or you can cook them with any kind of protein. And it's a whole meal, maybe served over rice. So I'm thinking that as we journey, we'll open up our eyes to meet new communities, let more relatives that have been disenfranchised come back into the family, and bring all the gifts that they have, their cultural gifts, to share it and enrich our ability to eat a better diet. Because a diet based on greens and beans is a better diet.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I was very excited to feature greens in the kit this year, just because of the nutritional powerhouses that they are. I mean, greens in your diet is everything. If you can have greens, you have a lot of nutrition. From most of the vitamins are present in greens. I mean, even vitamin C is in greens. So and having I am curious about the peanut butter, being used in cooking greens too. Oftentimes there's some sort of fat, because some of those vitamins that are in green are only absorbed when you have fat prepared with them. So there's a lot of really important knowledge that has come down through the recipes that is actually very nutritionally sound. I know people say, like, maybe don't eat so much bacon, but also bacon's really helpful for getting the most out of the green nutrition. So it's important to think about those things too. Very cool. We've been focusing a lot on collards, and we have so many different seeds in the kit. And I'm curious, since we've got Melissa here, who has a nice relationship with the mustard, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the feasters.
Yeah, I'd love to. So one of my roles as a community seed person is when I stumble across someone who's growing something really interesting that seems like it's interesting or unusual or rare, it's not in the seed catalogs, is sort of learning more about that plant and that family or person and their story, and then trying to elevate it so that they're more sustainable, right? Because the classic story that we hear a lot, not only are there fewer farmers in the world and they're not getting any younger, there's even fewer seed savers. And a lot of times, whether they're gardeners or farmers, there's not always, the grandchild or someone who's interested in carrying along those traditions, which is how a lot of seeds have become endangered or disappeared over time. So I found one of these. Someone had been telling me about this local mustard green that had been growing for a while, and I really ought to meet this old man, Jerome Feaster, and see what he's got going on at his homestead. And so I found him and I saw his greens, and I was like, these are definitely something real interesting that I haven't seen before. And prior to meeting me, he knew he had something cool too. It's not like I stumbled along and was like, hey, these are neat. So he had sent his, he actually overnighted a box of his mustard greens that he'd been stewarding for a long time, because his mother had passed them along to him. And then previous to that, her mother had passed them along. And he sent a box overnight to Seed Savers Exchange in Decorah, Iowa, with a handwritten note, like, these are something, what do you think? And so they looked at them and also kind of concurred, like, yeah, we've not seen this before. This is unique. And so they kind of gave him the title, you know, Feaster Family Heirloom Mustard, and had its whole number. And so he was really proud that, you know, it was officially a thing, even though without the official papers, you know, we know it's a thing and it's special. But so that was kind of the first step. And then we started saying, well, okay, where do we get the seeds? You know, because it's not like seeds were available. No one can just purchase them. So I started working with Jerome to propagate these seeds and get them out there. And yeah, you know, his family moved to Florida in like the, I don't know, mid 1800s from the Pennsylvania area. And they had brought some seeds with them that had been passed around before then. You know, talking about seeds evolving, sometimes it's really hard to trace a crop's history because it's not been traceable or written down, and it's passed hands so many times that people change the name, because now it's, I see it all the time, people forget to label their plants and then save the seeds, so they call it something new. But he knows that this particular mustard was passed down in his family for a number of generations, and he's got a couple of cute grandsons, and they think the garden's cool, but I'm not sure that they're ready to, you know, be stewards of the seed yet. So we got people excited about it. It is a really unique crop. It is a mustard green, so it's kind of got that wasabi kick, which is not everyone's thing, but for those that like it, it is. And when it cooks down, it's actually kind of sweet. And they're gigantic. I mean, if you have a healthy mustard and it doesn't take much, they can grow in poor soil, but they are very happy if you give them a little extra love. The leaves are almost as big as like my whole upper body. You know, I can take a picture of myself and just cover it. And the really unique quality, well, there's a couple things. And Dr. David Shields, who's chair of the Slow Food Arc of Taste Southeast and is a culinary historian in the South, he was sent a sample of it. And, you know, when he says something, then people start looking at it. And I really need to be sending some of these to Adrian, actually, now that I think about it. But, you know, he noticed that it didn't have sort of that, like some mustards really just leave a funny taste in your mouth and they're a little too much. And this did not have that to him. And then the really unique quality that separates it, besides this, you know, slightly more appealing taste, is the central midrib. And, you know, similar to collards, where it's sort of just what you don't even think about doing in the kitchen, is you throw that stem out, which is absolutely useful. This stem, if you cut it out, like I really think you're actually missing the whole point of these greens. It is amazing. We have kids in the garden because it's not as spicy. It still has flavor, but it's juicy and it's crunchy and it's kind of like a really good celery maybe. So kids in the garden will strip the leaves off and then just chew on the stem. And we've learned with kids in the garden, like if we just bring ranch dressing, it can't be any fancy, no fancy ranch. Don't make it at home. Don't try to bring in some organic, like good looking, like just bring ranch, just bring straight up ranch dressing. They will dip that stem in and eat it. They love it any which way. And then I'm sure, you know, people with more fine palates and ideas other than me can find uses for those stems to chop them up and put them into things. So it's just been really exciting. And now if you Google Feaster mustards, it's in a couple different seed catalogs. We've been able to get it out there in the world and make sure other people are taking care of it. And then it's even been picked up by just random small seed companies I've never heard of before, which is, that's great, right? That's how seeds move around and start getting more well-known and taking care of other people, and then adapting to people's places if they're, you know, going to get involved in saving seeds. So it'd be really interesting to, you know, see what other people do with feasters. And I know they grow outside of North Florida because the folks in Iowa Seed Savers grew it as a really great vegetable. They had trouble getting it to go to seed. Probably it was a little stunned, you know, it's been in North Florida for a long time and they throw it out in Iowa, but it grew great as a vegetable, but the seed production was a little more challenging. So it'll just take time and it'll start doing it for sure. But yeah, that's the Feaster mustard. It's fun. Grow it.
Wonderful. Yeah, grow it. I love big vegetables. They're so fun. You get so much packed, you know, just so much for your bang for your buck, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Just there's just so much there, and you have different textures with the sort of wasabi tasting leaves, and then those midribs are sweet and juicy and hydrating and delicious. So yeah, all those different textures for sure. I was curious, Adrian, about any other cooking ideas that you might have for any of the other items in the kit, or anything that you're inspired by. One of the things I'm really excited about is chicories, and chicories are not part of American diets so much. Our Italian American friends are really champions of those. And in America, we have a bunch of a little bit of a renaissance happening with the chicories up in the Northwest states. The Culinary Breeding Network, who's a partner of Slow Food USA this year, is going to help us develop some programming later this year, has done a chicory week to promote the biodiversity of chicories and the deliciousness that they can bring to our foods. Because all of these greens have different flavor profiles, right? We talked about sort of the earthiness of the collards and the spiciness of the mustards. The chicories are like the bitter group, so they have definitely a different palate. And the Yu Choi Sum is like a sweet green. It's got really juicy stalks and really succulent leaves, almost like a spinach. So I'd love to hear if you have any experience working with like the amaranth or the chicories group, any inspiration you can give folks.
So interesting when you get, a new ingredient, and especially when you didn't grow up with it, right? And you have to figure out this variety of what you can do with it. And the first thing a lot of people do is go to what they know, right? So they go, oh, it's this green, maybe we can boil it, it's close to a spinach, or it's close to, or you have this bittery taste and you don't know what to do with it. And I tell people all the time, you must try it raw. Try it raw first, right? Just try it out. Figure out if this is more of a base for you to use in a salad, or if this is more of a base to use in a meal. And substitute it out for things that you usually use. So if you use collards or you use certain things in certain stews, maybe this could take the place of that. I think our American palate is not very broad. We like sweet and sweet. So
Yep.
being able to expand your palate and allowing those bitter tastes in there, herbal wise, is really good for you. But also as a chef, being able to expand people's palates in being able to tell that story kind of broadens the horizon of what we can do with these meals. Ironically, when Bonnetta said peanut butter, we do use a lot of those different types of fat, but we can use more ground peanuts or peanut butter or ground pumpkin seeds. And this has a lot of different recipes in which you can use these greens with that fat to do more of a steaming or more of like what you would do for a collard green. And you will see these types of dishes, especially in West Africa. And I do tell people, like, if you get an ingredient, you try it out and try it at least 3 times, right? Don't hate it the first time, but try it a couple times. And also, look up recipes, go beyond the American palate, because these plants and these ingredients have been around for a very, very, very long time. And there are very scrumptious different recipes to be able to be used on them.
Great advice. Always try something new. It's going to be interesting, and you might find a new favorite thing. We're to the point in our panel here that I want to open to audience questions. My colleague Brian has been collating questions. Brian, do we have any from the audience?
Yes, we do. We have a question from Lindsay, who asked what the link is that connects all of the greens in this year's Plant a Seed campaign.
Well, I guess what I would say is the link is that they're all greens and they all grow pretty much everywhere. They're part of this huge big group of greens that we selected 5 different green categories to be represented in the kit. And I am excited to see how people use them this year, in their gardens, and how everybody is growing them. And I would like to touch a little bit on growing tips or any pest advice you can give to new growers of greens. I think I see another question that someone's asking, what is the most difficult thing about growing greens at home in the small garden? Bonnetta, why don't you chime in?
Yeah, I want to talk about how the greens are related. So in my interviews with my family, with my husband's family, you know, we have a project with Princeton University and Spelman College to collect seed stories. So we're traveling and our goal is to collect as many of these as possible. One of the things we're really hearing is discussion around mixed greens. So just today, as I was interviewing some of the elder members of my husband's family, they talked about, well, Mama always made those greens mixed. And so that took me back to my childhood, walking the hills and over the land, hunting for wild greens. When I remember there was a certain time of year, there was pull over the wild mustard are blooming. And then there were the dandelions, you know, and there was poke that was eaten. Right now, there's amaranth growing along every single freeway in the United States, I bet that people haven't understood is real food, but it's predicted that that will be the food of the future because of its resiliency. So what I'm saying is that even though you may not have enough of one variety to make a pot to feed a family of 2, 3, 5, or 10, if you collect all the greens that you have and put them in one pot, then you'll have what many families had for dinner during the week, just a regular night dinner is mixed greens. Now, I have never tried the chicory in there because I understood chicory as something that was used in Louisiana with coffee. And so it's tradition, you know, I think of it around that. But I also realize there are many cultures that eat lettuce as well, and it's cooked as prepared. So we might as well throw whatever we have in there. So let's throw everything in that pot and see what we can do. It's going to be healthy, nutritious, and exciting. Oh yeah. Somebody talked about the African greens. Yes, what we've observed is both east, north, south, and west. Pumpkin leaves, sweet potato leaves, and the cucumber leaves are used as green. We were visiting a very large farm in Massachusetts, and the director of that farming cooperative said it was so interesting the way that Americans would grow out a whole field of peas and collect something that was this big and leave the primary crop to go to waste. She just thought that was foolish. And so throw all those greens in that pot too. And don't forget to throw some okra leaf greens in there too.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that you brought up that, and thank you to our question that was asked about like the pumpkin leaves are being used. One of the reasons why I put amaranth in this kit is I was hoping that would start a conversation with people about all the wild greens around us and all the greens that we put in our garden that aren't necessarily put there for their greens, but you can also eat their greens, like the pumpkin tops, sweet potato leaves. You can actually eat pepper plant leaves. Those are delicious. There's so many greens around us, especially this time of year. Right now, my indigenous friends have been posting all left and right about nettles. It's stinging nettle season for folks everywhere in the Northeast. At least it's starting to come up here. And radish leaves, someone in the chat as well. Yes, it's very exciting to just think about how much food is around you, especially in the springtime for those of us in the northern climates where it's been so cold and there's not been anything fresh for a long time. And you know, the little things are starting to crop up that like the nettles and like, you know, wild onion and things like that, where we can just
Yeah,
start
the
seasoning our
ramps.
dishes again. And exactly, so wonderful. And then beet leaves, we haven't even talked about beets and the chards, you know, that whole family is part of the spinach family. And what a wide and varied family that is too. And I know a lot of people have a lot of success growing chard and beets in their gardens. And you can eat those beet leaves. Definitely put those in your pot.
Most definitely eat those.
It has some nutrition. I remember when we were looking at starting farms in areas that had high infant mortality rates and high malnutrition rates, and we realized that chard and beets had probably some of the most nutritious leaves, and so we added those to our kits for communities that were suffering from malnutrition, only to find out that those greens were favorites, like in Eritrea and Ethiopia. That was like their go-to green. And they have it, all this rainbow of color. It's a pretty thing. It cooks very quickly. So those kind of greens would actually be good for our current lifestyles where we have so little time and so much nonsense to take care of.
Yeah, I think to
Perfect.
someone's comment earlier, they were asking about small space gardens and challenges, and this topic just kind of made me think of how many growers really don't realize how multi-use these crops are. So like even something like broccoli, people are waiting and waiting and waiting for these broccoli heads to form. And I'm like, in the meantime, like there's all these leaves there. Sweet potatoes, those are running wild and we're waiting to dig up these amazing tubers. And in the meantime, nutritious greens are all over the place. Okra, Bonnetta mentioned. John Jackson, who's a farmer friend up in Milledgeville, Georgia of mine, brought back this, what he calls motherland okra from his heritage from Liberia. And this particular okra is amazing and gorgeous. And it's like a tree and it's grown for the leaves. I mean, the pods are great. You eat those too, but it's really, again, it's leaves like bigger than my head. Yeah. Medicinal too, like used a lot in ceremony and for nursing mothers and pregnant women and greens. So yeah, just like thinking about not just one singular use for these plants, that a lot of them are sitting there waiting with these greens, and some of the weeds growing around your garden you might be pulling out might actually be something you want to throw in that mixed green pot. We got a lot right now here. Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah, each your yard.
I would like to also talk about callaloo.
Oh, yes.
So when we first started doing this work, we needed to find out what was essential, what was important. So we just started doing these activities with all these grandmas. And we asked grandmothers what was grown in their garden, and we came up with this. And we were blessed to have a whole bunch of Caribbean grandmothers to ask from all these different islands. And what was interesting was, well, what is callaloo? And that just took us down a rabbit hole you won't believe. And what we found out is callaloo is the name of the dish. Depending on what island you are, determines what green is used. So in Jamaica, they said they wanted amaranth, but they really didn't mean just any amaranth. Okay, they had a lot of rules. What they prefer is that black-seeded wide leaf amaranth. It's like nothing you see available in stores here. And then in Trinidad and Tobago, they actually were talking about taro leaves. And so we were really excited to be able to find some taro that had naturalized itself in our region here. But eat greens. That's what we should tell everybody. They should just be eating everything except don't eat white potato leaves. I cannot tell you in good faith to eat every leaf.
Yeah.
I think what's great about this kit is just opening our world to the different varieties. I mean, you're not going to get this at the grocery store. So this is an opportunity to really branch out on different flavors and different ideas and understand the storyline of a lot of these different seeds. But also, it can start making a demand that some of this needs to be shown up in the grocery store and be part of the varieties, the limited varieties we already do have at the grocery store. But it also provides farmers different opportunities to grow different varieties, which will help us with some of these ultra crosses that we have, but also strengthen our varieties that we have today.
100% agree. Vote with your fork, right? So if you want the food, start demanding that it shows up at your farmers markets, and then the growers will grow it, and then hopefully eventually it'll be available to the public at the grocery store. That relationship with your growers is a key component here to get these things on our plates. And in the meantime, you can grow them in your gardens and try them for yourself, and then get inspired by other things to try as well. And most of these greens you can grow in a pot or in an urban environment. Greens are very adaptable to small spaces. So don't hesitate. If you don't have ground to grow into, definitely try growing all of these greens in a pot. One pot per green though. Don't crowd them. There's some tips in the little green zine. And there's always microgreens. I mean, we didn't even touch upon like all the different
Oh, yeah.
stages of growth that we could be growing them. I always start microgreens, you know, in March when it's the darkest winter, but then within 3 weeks, you can have little greens in your salad and on your sandwiches. It's just super, super lovely. So yeah, experiment with the age of the greens, experiment with the different varieties of the greens and different dishes and different regions that can give us some inspiration on those dishes. Well, amazing. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I just love that you've spent your time with us today. And obviously there's more that we can cover, but hopefully this is starting a conversation that we can continue to have this year. I have some plans for programming for our network. We're going to have a collard week for the Slow Food Network in the end of October, early November. So we're going to be connecting a lot with the Heirloom Collard Project to help us plan that out. And then we're also going to do a chicory week in October to sort of highlight this really interesting group of greens that we could be, greens and reds, I like to call it the chicory group, because there's a lot of radicchio in that group too. There's just a world of new flavors and new interesting things to taste and try and grow. So thank you for being our guides today, taking us around the world in greens. It was such a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Mara.
Thanks for
organizing
having
all
us.
this.
Thank you. Of course. And we asked at the beginning, we were going to do a giveaway of one of these kits. Brian, do we have a result of that yet?
Yes, the winner chosen at random is Cheyenne Dewey. Congratulations. We'll be in touch to get your address and send you off a plant a seed kit.
Yay, amazing, Cheyenne. We'll get those in the mail ASAP. And all the kits are going out in the mail this week and next week. So if you've already ordered your kits, they're on their way. I have my whole house is filled with them, and we had a great session packing them up. So they're going to be going off to your lovely homes very shortly. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and eat your greens.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.